is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello, welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. 120 people dead, hundreds missing as flooding devastates Western Europe, with many wondering why weather warnings were missed.
Our other headlines, it's now the world's largest carbon trading market as China intensifies efforts to cut emissions.
The UK government says the time is right for England to get back to business by fully reopening up venues like this. So, is it realistic or reckless?
And along with the Prado Museum, this area is a unique mix of culture, science and nature, all located in the very heart of the city.
Spain hopes to celebrate winning more UNESCO World Heritage Sites. At least 120 people dead and more than 1,000 missing. The worst flooding in decades has brought chaos to parts of Germany and neighbouring Belgium, as well as the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Switzerland.
Entire communities are in ruins after swollen rivers swept through towns and villages. The military has been called in for widespread search and rescue operations. Our correspondent Lucy Hoff is in Belgium, but first Trent Murray begins our coverage from Germany.
Rescuers race against time in a desperate search for survivors. Over 100 people have been confirmed killed as a result of the devastating floods which lashed northwest Germany Wednesday. Residents have likened the raging torrents of water to an inland tsunami, sweeping away lives and livelihoods.
It's unbelievable because I heard a strange noise and I was opening the front door and then the water was coming from everywhere and I just pushed hard to close the door, and I needed the help of my son, and together we could close the door, but from everywhere the water was coming in. There are so many tragedies, so many lives which are gone now, and they're still searching for people, and that's so dramatic and shiver.
Hundreds of people remain missing, with the German military joining search and rescue efforts as anxious families await news on their lost loved ones.
Wir geben natürlich die Hoffnung nicht auf.
We are not giving up hope. People can count on all forces in the country to stand together, from the local to federal administration. And under the very most difficult conditions, we are doing everything we can to save lives and repair damage and avert further dangers.
Well, here in the village of Arweiler, the clean-up operation is now well and truly underway. This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region, and businesses here tell me that the waters simply rose so quickly that they had very little time to try and save any stock. Instead, many simply had to abandon their shops and seek safety on higher ground. For business owners like Alexander Petkovsky, the floods have dealt a huge blow.
It's so fast, it comes in 50 minutes, 1 meter water, and I will close up in the store, so I will get up, and I cannot go to my family, nothing, I can't go anywhere. I think it will take months or years to put all, so look at the street. It takes a year to I cannot tell anything.
As rescuers continue to comb through the destruction, fresh questions are being raised about whether early warnings were given to residents in flood zones. But for now, local communities are coming together to search through what remains so they can start to plan on how to rebuild.
Well, let's take you to Belgium now and our correspondent Lucy Hoff. Lucy, we've been watching some extraordinary pictures in Germany. What's the latest on the damage there and the casualties?
Well, Jamie, catastrophic damage here in Belgium, particularly in this region of Liège in Wallonia.
The death toll now surpassing 20, with more expected to be announced, unfortunately, and a couple of dozen people still missing. People have just been able today to return to their homes in some parts of this region to find their lives and livelihoods completely destroyed. Thousands of people in this region are left without power, and the continued rescue operations being carried out to find those missing people being carried out under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, a lack of power, continued flooding in major roads, as well as a huge amount of road closures. So a really tragic situation here. The Belgian Prime Minister has declared that there should be a national day of mourning later on this month, on July the 20th. But meanwhile, communities here assessing the damage, trying to scrabble from the rubbish what they can, but the damage really just beginning, and certainly these are efforts that will be continuing in the days and weeks to come.
There were some evacuations ahead of these floods, weren't there?
There were, Jamie. Certainly warnings did come to communities like this one that were at risk of flooding. The city of Liège was told yesterday that there should be evacuations for anyone that could leave the city. Businesses were ordered to close at 3 p.m, but many were unreachable, and people were unfortunately trapped in their homes. The flash flooding came very quickly. People in this town where I am now, those flash floods came within hours. People were forced to climb onto their roofs, to go upstairs and await rescue. But one person that I was just talking to was trapped in their home for 48 hours without clean water, without food, and until the search operation was able to get to them. So those warnings, much criticism today, those warnings did not come soon enough, and that death toll of this region of 20, and that death toll expected to rise, some saying could be attributed to the fact that those warnings did not come in sufficient time.
Lucy, is the worst of the flooding over now, or is there more rainfall on the way?
Unfortunately, the forecast is not good in this region overnight, although nothing like the rainfall that we saw yesterday. As you can hear from that siren, the rescue operation is still very much going on. We're told that there is a risk that the River Meuse, which runs through the centre of Liège, is at risk of bursting. We know that the banks there are at really their highest limit, and again, people are being told there to be on high alert. In a town called Marseille, which is just on the border with the Netherlands, people there are on a warning that they may need to evacuate given the river levels there, and we're told that they could be reaching the peak later on this afternoon local time. So, Jamie, this is far from over, although certainly this community is hoping that the worst was seen yesterday, and this really is now a clean-up and a continued recovery operation.
Lucy Hoff in Belgium, thank you very much.
Let's talk to our correspondent Trent Murray, who's in Ahrweiler. So, Trent, we got a sense of it from your report, but describe for us the scale of this flooding and the devastation it's caused.
Yeah, well, Robin, 48 hours after this flood emergency first started to hit this region, there is just an extraordinary amount of damage and destruction that has been left in its wake. I don't know if you can see behind me, that is the gate, the entrance to the old part of the city here in Ahrweiler, and it's been the area that has been hardest hit. It's a bit lower than the rest of the city, and it's in there that there has been some very, very serious damage and a number of casualties. As we mentioned in the report, over 100 people have now been confirmed killed, and over 1,000 are still missing. So this is still very much a search and rescue operation that is underway here, trying to find survivors that may still be trapped in their homes as part of this flood water. Over 15,000 police and other emergency workers are joining the effort to try and search for people. We also know that the German military has been called up. All domestic defence exercises have been cancelled, and the Defence Minister has asked troops to be redeployed here as part of that rescue effort. I suspect that in coming hours we'll start to see more people leave the town here. It's still virtually uninhabitable in parts because there is no electricity, because there is no water, but throughout much of today there has been also the community really coming together as part of that clean-up effort to try and rebuild their lives somewhat from the ruins.
And Trent, ahead of this flooding, severe weather alerts were issued. Why wasn't more done to prepare?
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the main questions that's being asked by residents here as well. We understand that the German Weather Service did issue warnings about heavy rain earlier in the week, and those warnings were sent to local authorities like this one here in Ahrweiler. The German Weather Service also says, though, that it's up to those same authorities to issue evacuation orders. Well, clearly in this town that didn't happen, as well as a number of other villages, and so there will be an investigation, I suspect, in coming weeks and months to work out exactly what went wrong. This is meant to be one of the most advanced early warning systems in Europe, and clearly it did not go to plan in this case. We understand Chancellor Angela Merkel has been briefed on the situation during her visit to the United States. She's held video conferences with emergency service leaders here. But as I say, the priority now still remains that search and rescue effort, desperately trying to find lost loved ones for families that face an anxious wait this weekend.
And Trent, we heard from Lucy in Belgium that when it came to the weather, the worst was perhaps yet to come. What's the forecast where you are? Is the rain finished?
There has been some respite in the weather today, which has helped rescuers try and access some of those more difficult to reach areas. We do understand that some more rain could be on the way, but a little bit further south of here, away from the real epicentre of the flood emergency, and that rain is not expected to be as heavy as we saw earlier in the week. So there is hope that that rain, while it may slow down some of the rescue efforts in parts, it won't hopefully pose any more serious danger to low-lying communities.
Trent Murray in Ahrweiler in Germany, thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Greece weighs up rising COVID cases with the desperate need to get its economy moving.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Leaders from 21 Asia-Pacific economies have agreed to speed up access to COVID vaccines. The APEC special meeting was called by this year's host, New Zealand.
in an effort to shore up collective efforts to battle the pandemic and its economic impact. China's President Xi Jinping promised $3 billion in international aid over the next 3 years. He also urged APEC members to facilitate trade and investment.
There's a Maori saying in New Zealand that goes, "Turn your face to the sun and the shadows will fall behind you." We have full confidence in humanity's victory over the pandemic through cooperation. We have full confidence in the prospects of the world economic recovery. We have full confidence in a shared bright future of humanity. Let's stand with each other in solidarity, promote anti-COVID cooperation and economic recovery, and work for a bright future of prosperity for all in the Asia-Pacific.
It's a big day in China's climate action plan. The country's carbon trading market has finally gone online, covering 4 billion tons of CO2 emissions at effectively the world's largest carbon trading market, overtaking the European Union. In Phase 1, over 2,000 companies in the power sector are included. These are China's biggest emitters, accounting for 40% of the country's total emissions. Well, these companies will be given fixed quotas to cover their emissions. Any deficit can be sold on the exchange or surplus bought back. Eventually, the price for emissions will be set by the market, of course. China plans to include other high-emission industries. Companies in the petrochemicals, construction, iron and steel sectors will start trading in the next 3 to 5 years. So how has the market reacted so far? Well, by the end of the business day, the price closed at nearly $8 per tonne. That's up 6.7% compared with the launch price.
Adding a cost to CO2 emissions is a watershed moment for many of China's energy-intensive companies. While some are counting the cost of the green transformation, others see huge investment opportunities. CGTN's Yu Bo-kun reports.
Situated in the center of Beijing, Sino-Carbon Innovation and Investment is one of the very first companies to bet on the takeoff of China's carbon trading market. Set up around 10 years ago, it now offers a range of carbon emissions consultation services to businesses and local governments. Qian Xueqiang, Deputy General Manager of Sino-Carbon, is a veteran in climate change issues. He says a mindset shift has already taken place across China. His staff had to work around the clock over the past year as their business has been booming.
We are too busy, cannot handling all of these demands now. 80 cities now is coming to us. We are helping them to formulate the action plans, the roadmap to achieve carbon peaking and build a carbon neutral city.
Economists say a market-oriented pricing mechanism will push companies to become more innovative in reducing energy consumption and adjust their investment strategies. The entire green push is forecast to cost China trillions of dollars.
For China, probably we need 140 trillion yuan to achieve carbon neutrality in the next 40 years. That means for the first 10 years, we need 2.2 trillion yuan each year. That means from now to the carbon emission peak in 2030. But after that, probably we need like 3.9 trillion yuan each year.
To mobilize so much capital requires China's financial institutions to step up and is expected to ultimately help build a more mature and sound financial market.
I think it will also bring a fundamental change to the whole financial system. So that's why we spent a lot of time on this topic. We want to come up with some new instruments, new business models, and try to cooperate with our customers to participate in this new reform.
Currently, China's carbon per ton is priced at around $10, while that in the EU is more than $68. Despite a huge difference, Chuan is hopeful of a potential link between these two markets, but he cautions that there are challenges.
The biggest challenge is not technical challenges like how we report, how we measure the emissions, how we allocate. These are technical problems. The biggest challenge is politically is how EU and China, for example, we mutually recognize your cap is a cap equivalent to our cap.
International economists have indicated that carbon should be priced somewhere between $50 to $100 by 2030 if markets and prices were to have any impact on behavior. But so far, only the EU has come to closest to this price target. It has been functioning for more than 16 years. Yu Bo-kun, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's talk to Isabella Hilton, the founder and senior advisor of China Dialogue. Isabel, welcome. How significant is it for China to launch this emission trading scheme?
Well, I think it's hugely significant for China and actually for everybody, since China is such an enormous player in climate change and a very big emitter. It's been a long business. A lot of experimentation has gone on. And, you know, I think that the launch of this scheme has been awaited with some anticipation by the rest of the world, because if it operates correctly, if it operates well, it could be a major factor in helping China get to its 2060 target of carbon neutrality.
So how long will it take to see any impact on China's overall emissions? What are we talking here, years?
Well, I guess if the EU ETS is anything to go by, that launched in 2005, and it's relatively recently that it's begun to have some traction. But that's really all in the design and the execution. And when the EU ETS was the first one. So again, there was a certain amount of, you know, tentative motion. Also, when you start something like this, which is trying to drive a major transition, there's a lot of nervousness in the incumbent players. So everybody is really asking for a bit of indulgence at the beginning so that, you know, they can adjust, they can see how it works, they can see how the system works. You don't want a shock to the system, but what you want is a comprehensive, well-designed system that you can ratchet up, that you can tighten up. And that's what's happened in Europe. So the price of carbon has gone from, you know, $11 a ton, which does nothing, to 55, 60, which is beginning to have an effect. And that is driving change. And it gives a kind of certainty to investors, to people who are planning beyond the power sector. People who use a lot of power, like steel or cement or heavy industry, can now plan because they know that in the future, the cost of emission is going to go in one direction. It's going to go up. And so they should plan against that and invest against that.
How will this be audited?
Well, that's a big question. China will audit its own, and that will be hugely important. And I think the transparency of that auditing system will be hugely important to the credibility of the trading system. But, you know, in theory, the market will demand that when it you know, manages the transition to a market system. You know, you can audit emissions pretty effectively remotely these days. The technology exists. It will begin by, you know, self-reporting, I'm sure. And again, that's a system that is going to have to be built and checked and verified and seen to function to give the market confidence. I think the big plus for China is that as Europe moves into its next big phase of mitigation, which plans were announced just last week, and the disasters in Germany are, I think, going to put a lot of energy into those plans. They are likely to include some kind of border adjustment mechanism to protect low carbon industries in Europe from cheaper competition. So the alignment of these two systems would allow Chinese goods to be recognized within that European system, and it would greatly facilitate trade. So I think there's a big interest in getting these two systems into alignment, into mutual recognition, and closing the price gap, which will take a while.
Let's compare these two systems, China and Europe's practices. China's starting price is relatively low. Why is that?
Well, it's as I said, you don't want to start off with a shock. Europe started off with a low price. It also started off with very generous allowances, free allowances, and that means that the price is low on the market. And China is pretty much doing the same. Also, China hasn't set an absolute cap. It's set an efficiency target, essentially. So it's quite loose right now. We would very much expect that to as I say, to be ratcheted, to tighten up. That will drive the price up. But as you start off, certainly it was the case in Europe that there was a generosity, perhaps an over-generosity in allowances at the beginning.
Isabel Hilton in London, thank you very much.
CGTN.com has all the week's top stories from China. Here's a quick look. All that and more at CGTNEurope.com.
UK daily COVID cases have passed 50,000, the highest number since January. Hospital admissions in England are also up. Yes, with 65% of the adult population now fully vaccinated, the UK government is lifting restrictions in England from Monday to restore some kind of normality. That decision is divisive. But as Juliet Mann now explains, the alternative could mean businesses failing.
The stage is set. After a stop-start year, this cosy theatre longs to play again to a full house.
We run on ticket sales alone, and we don't receive any private funding, so to only have half the capacity then halves obviously the amount of money that we then have to spend or have available to spend, especially after paying members of staff and things like that. So in terms of paying then cast members and then the whole behind the scenes things in terms of marketing and all of that, like it's taken a massive hit.
Pubs too want to draw in their usual crowds.
We have loads of different customers, so I would say half of them, maybe more than half, is like excited and can't wait to go back to normal. And the other half kept saying like, that's not gonna happen, we'll go into another lockdown, we won't have Christmas.
The pandemic has seen devastating loss of lives, but 3 lockdowns and widespread uncertainty also cost the UK economy dear. COVID-19 has been the main cause of the $348 billion drop in the value of UK goods and services over the last year. Forecasters warned that not fully opening up the economy could cost upwards of $76 million a day. Even the 1-month delay to removing social distancing guidelines cost the hospitality industry some $4 billion in sales.
What we're seeing is that in the entertainment sector, earnings are still way below where they were pre-pandemic. And the concern is that unless they have a period of solid growth over the next few months, they won't be able to recoup all the losses they have made over the period of closures that we've seen.
Big government intervention has meant a year of unprecedented Treasury spending, with the Bank of England printing money to pay for it. The true cost may be yet to come when wage subsidies and business support schemes wind down.
Looking at what businesses need to survive and not go under is, I think, absolutely the priority, because the environment is still pretty fragile, and we've seen what's happening also on the export front. On top of that, there's Brexit, which is adding to the uncertainty. So, yes, I think it's going to be a pretty tough period to get the balance right for the government.
A fine balance between protecting the health of the people and profits. That's why this pub is keeping some restrictions in place so customers and staff feel safe, including still not taking orders at the bar. Excuse me, can I set up a tab?
Oh, of course you can.
The UK government hopes a consumer spending splurge will kickstart it all, but it will be a long time before the economy is back to anything like it was. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
Well, UK firms have largely welcomed Monday's lifting of restrictions, but many are still concerned about the guidelines, with some measures being kept in place. Suren Thiru is the head of economics for the British Chambers of Commerce. He told me about the impact self-isolation is having on businesses.
Well, we're hearing lots of cases of business of individuals having to self-isolate, which is causing quite significant staff shortages across most sectors of the economy. That's impacting business activity on a day-to-day basis. And that's unfortunately only going to get worse with cases likely to rise over the next couple of weeks and months.
And there's been some criticism too about mixed messages when it comes to mask wearing. How are businesses reacting to that?
Well, businesses want to do all they can to protect their staff and protect their customers. But of course, business leaders aren't health experts. So what businesses really need is greater clarity and guidance for government on what they should and shouldn't be doing to make sure that businesses have the confidence to open fully as we move into the next couple of weeks and months.
And you talk about guidance. There's certainly been uncertainty around shifting restrictions and timelines. So how damaging has that been to business?
Well, the stop-start approach that we've seen over the past year or so has impacted business confidence, has impacted business activity and cash flow as well, which hurt businesses quite significantly, particularly at the smaller end. Now, businesses at the moment are really confident of the future. The vaccine rollout has supported business confidence in particular, but there is concern about what may happen as cases start to rise, and also the implementation of some of the new guidance around opening fully over the next couple of weeks. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, but that's certainly a concern for businesses.
There is obviously a balancing act to be done, though, between managing the needs of the economy and protecting public health.
That's, of course, a critical balance. And for businesses in particular, what they tell me is that their priority is to keep their staff and customers safe. And this also applies to the wider economy as well, because if consumers are reluctant to interact and spend because they're concerned about rising cases or the lack of protection in place, that could have an impact on the wider economy as well.
So we're starting to see things getting back to a kind of normal. What's your forecast? When do you think we will see the economy return to perhaps pre-pandemic levels?
Well, at the moment, the UK economy is in a bit of a sweet spot because we are seeing the boost from the economy reopening, so release of pent-up consumer demand, and that's been supported by ongoing government support and a rapid vaccine rollout. However, as we move through the summer months, we do expect the economy to start to slow a little bit as some of that momentum starts to fall away. So we think the UK economy is going to get back to sort of pre-pandemic levels at the back end of this year or potentially into first quarter of next year.
And are there any particular measures that you think business need to get things back on track?
Well, what we are likely to see post 19th of July, while there is a full reopening of the economy, for some sectors that isn't the case. So, for example, the airline sector is one that will still be hit by ongoing restrictions. So the government needs to look at supporting some of these sectors who will still not be able to operate at full capacity. Another area they need to look at as well is a lot of businesses have taken on a lot of debt through this pandemic period. So looking at ways of helping support businesses through that period, because it's not just bank debt that they've taken on, but also tax deferrals as well. So there's a lot of money, there's a lot of businesses holding a lot of debt, which could impact investment and the wider recovery.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, President Biden says he's confident in Afghanistan's abilities to fight Taliban insurgents, but not everyone is convinced.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens.
4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, repeat last clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy idea.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: 120 people dead, hundreds more missing as flooding devastates Europe, with many wondering why weather warnings were missed.
It's now the world's largest carbon trading market as China intensifies efforts to cut emissions.
And the UK's daily COVID infections pass 50,000 just days before the economy reopens fully.
Security is high on the agenda as Asian leaders and China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi meet in Uzbekistan for a summit. The event's also being attended by Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. Trade links, developing infrastructure and improving internet connectivity are also under discussion. Let's go live now to Moscow and talk to our correspondent Julia Chapman. So, Julia, this region has a long and troubled history. What are today's talks likely to focus on?
Well, the main thrust of this event in the Uzbek capital, Tashkent, has been really addressing the historic underdevelopment of Central and Southern Asia. This event has been attended by leaders and representatives of more than 40 countries, including all the relevant regional leaders, as well as China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and representatives from the US and the EU as well. And there's been much discussion of all the development opportunities in this region, not least the major flagship railway that's being planned to stretch between Uzbekistan and Pakistan via Afghanistan. But that last country there, of course, brings up the issue of instability in the region, and there's no doubt that that was very much on the top of the minds of all of the people who were attending this event, because, of course, instability has been a major hurdle to the development of this part of the world.
And Julia, Russia's Sergei Lavrov is meeting Afghanistan's President Ghani. What's Moscow's biggest concern here?
Well, as the instability continues to grow in Afghanistan amid the ongoing withdrawal of Western troops from the country, Russia does have serious concerns that potential violence could spread into the former Soviet countries neighboring Afghanistan, such as Tajikistan, which, of course, sends many of its workers to Russia. And there have been concerns in the past that Islamist militants could come, and have indeed come, from that part of the world here into Russia. Of course, all of this has some painful echoes from Moscow. 30 years ago, in 1989, the Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan after a long and very painful war for the Soviet Union. And so, of course, Russia is very keen to maintain stability in Afghanistan in the modern day, and it has called for dialogue between all of the parties, strongly urging the Afghan government to sit down at the table with the Taliban in an effort to prevent any more violence and any more violence spilling out beyond its borders.
Julia Chapman in Moscow, thank you.
US President Joe Biden says he's confident that Afghanistan can fight off Taliban insurgents, but the Afghan government remains rather skeptical. The Taliban has made territorial gains as Western countries withdraw their troops, increasing the threat of a civil war. Louise Greenwood reports.
Afghans are worried about the rapid disintegration of security and the sweeping gains being made by the Taliban. But security forces say they are ready to defend the country.
Join the Afghan army to bring stability to the country. I know that performing military tasks in a country suffering from war is very difficult, but I'm not afraid. And I'm willing to sacrifice my life for my country.
If I was afraid of violence and fighting, I would have never joined the army. 3 times I tried to join, they rejected me because my documents were not complete. Eventually, I managed to sign up. My message for those who are fighting against us is very clear. If they are at peace with us, it'll be a good thing. If they're not, then we are here to face them.
Foreign troops will be out of Afghanistan within a few weeks. That means the burden of fighting the Taliban will be on the shoulders of the Afghan security forces. The Taliban's recent gains have raised serious questions about the capability of Afghan troops. The government and the US administration, however, are optimistic. Security forces have been paying a huge price for the war. 2 years ago, President Mohammad Ashraf Ghani said that more than 45,000 members of Afghanistan's security forces had been killed in the 5 years since he became leader. Nearby countries are also worried. Tajikistan has called in 20,000 military reservists to strengthen the border. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
China has denied claims by the World Health Organization that insufficient access has been given to investigators trying to find the source of the COVID outbreak in the country.
The WHO has called for more transparency following the March visit to Wuhan by its experts. China says all necessary access has already been given.
The fact is that during the joint expert group's visit to China, China allowed them to see the original data that needed special attention. And foreign experts have also made clear that the expert group has obtained a large amount of data and information on many occasions. They have also fully understood that some information involves personal privacy and cannot be copied and taken out of the country.
Greece, like most European countries, is seeing its COVID cases rising again with the rampant spread of the Delta variant. But like the UK and elsewhere, the Greek government is pushing ahead with efforts to get the economy moving, prompting some controversy. Evangelos Ipsas reports.
Wearing masks, using hand sanitizer and being fully vaccinated are all allies synonymous with containing the coronavirus. Strolling on the streets of Athens, you'll notice that most cafes and restaurants are now open, but only for those who can prove they are vaccinated. This is part of Greece's plan to contain the virus while keeping its economy running. The goal, to profit as much as it can during the busy summer tourism season. It's the backbone of the Greek economy. You might think that business owners are happy, but some are not.
Of course, the latest measures are controversial. That's why we will not comply with them, and we will keep our indoor area closed. We do have seats outdoors. We as business owners cannot be the ones to divide people.
The latest measure that kicked in on Friday allows fully vaccinated people to be seated indoors at cafes and restaurants after presenting a proof of vaccination and logging in on a government website. Many argue that the latest measures are divisive and unfair, and experts call it a dangerous combination with low vaccine counts and the spreading Delta variant. So far, the country has 450,000 confirmed cases and around 13,000 deaths. You might think that that number is quite low, but when it comes to the vaccination rollout program, less than 50% of the population has received both jabs. That's why the Greek government announced earlier this week that all healthcare workers should receive at least the first jab until August 16th, or they will be suspended. That move has sparked anger. Public health experts say at least 70% of the population will need to be fully vaccinated to achieve herd immunity. The question now is, can the government's vaccination program keep pace with its determination to get the economy moving? Evangelos Ipsas for CGTN, Athens, Greece.
Hungary will allow people to be given a third dose of COVID vaccine as the Prime Minister Viktor Orban says boosters will help stem a fourth wave. From August, Hungarians will be able to request a third dose 4 months after getting the second jab. Penelope Liert reports.
From August, Hungarians will be able to request a third dose of COVID vaccine. As a general rule, it should be given 4 months after the second dose, but it's up to individuals to approach their doctor or vaccination centre to organise a date. There will be no order for people being vaccinated, and the government says there are enough vaccine supplies. Doctors will decide what type of vaccine to give. It's also been announced it will become compulsory for healthcare workers to be fully vaccinated against COVID. In most cases, this means having the second dose before they're able to work in a healthcare setting. The news of the third dose of vaccine comes just days after the Budapest local government revealed after week-long antibody tests, almost a quarter of those over 60 who were tested did not show adequate antibodies after full Sinopharm vaccination. The Mayor of Budapest has been calling for the federal government to provide free antibody testing and extra doses of vaccine if needed. Hungary relied heavily on non-EMA approved vaccines Sputnik and Sinopharm in order to fast-track the vaccine rollout earlier this year. 66.2% of Hungarian adults have had at least their first dose of COVID vaccine, but vaccination rates have been slipping over the past few months. The country has fallen from the top spots in the European Union down to 11th. 15% of those aged over 65 have not been vaccinated at all, and the government is looking to send GPs into people's homes to offer vaccines. Vaccinations will also be offered to 12 to 15-year-olds in all schools in the days before classes resume in September. Penelope Leash, CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the Queen of Karate leads the way at Tokyo 2020 as Japan's female athletes fight for a gender-balanced games.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Legalised hooliganism. That's how Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban described the European Union after the EU launched a legal challenge against the country's ban on LGBTQ content in education. Orban defended his new law, saying it will protect children, but the EU says it's discriminatory. Orban also says he's expecting the EU to withhold recovery funds.
The President of the European Commission is in Ireland for talks on the Republic's future after Brexit. Ursula von der Leyen says she expects the UK to show flexibility on trade with Dublin. Negotiations have been complicated by the dispute over the Northern Ireland border. Separately, the EU has announced a further $1 billion in support for the Irish Republic to help with its pandemic response.
France's Justice Minister is being investigated over claims that he's abused his position in office. Éric Dupond-Moretti, a former top criminal lawyer, is accused of using his position to settle political scores. He has said he'll continue to serve in his role while fighting the case against him.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says his government will not allow anarchy to prevail. He was visiting one of the areas worst hit after a week of violence. Hundreds of businesses were destroyed as looters raided stores and set buildings alight. More than 100 people have died during the unrest, which started after his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, was jailed.
Around 2,000 people have been moved from their homes as crews battle the biggest wildfire in the United States. The so-called bootleg fire, which started on July the 6th, is ripping through Oregon. The blaze has already burned an area larger than New York City. Officials say at least 21 homes have been destroyed and 2,000 are at risk.
A week before the Olympics, some are still hoping these games will be cancelled. The president of the International Olympic Committee, Thomas Bach, was met by protesters during his visit to Hiroshima. They fear the Olympics might turn into a super spreader event. Critics also called Bach's visit to Hiroshima, designed to mark the first day of the Olympic truce, a publicity stunt.
For the first time, almost half of all athletes at the Olympic Games will be women. That's an achievement that means a lot for the hosts, Japan.
Phoebe Amoroso in Tokyo explains now how things are changing for Japan's female athletes.
Rika Matsumoto used to hate exercise. She began training in Muay Thai at age 16, inspired by her father who owned a gym. And at age 22, she made her debut as a pro. Now she works as a Muay Thai, kickboxing and fitness personal trainer in Tokyo. She says there aren't many female instructors like herself, but the number of women in the sport is increasing.
In the past, Muay Thai was seen as a man's sport and the gym as a man's place. But now times have changed. There are many women wanting to do kickboxing and Muay Thai for fitness, and there are now far nicer gyms, and so it's becoming an easier sport for them to join.
As Japan gears up to host the Olympics, women are in the spotlight. The IOC has vowed to make Tokyo 2020 the most gender-equitable games yet. For the first time, there will be at least one female and one male athlete in each of the teams participating in the games. And overall, female participation will be 49%. Japan falls just short of that goal at around 47%. But not all are convinced that the country is making progress.
While promoting gender equality, preparations for the Games are being carried out in a male-dominated world of sports, a world made for men by men. But this is not just in sports, but in the entire society.
In February, the head of the Tokyo Olympic Committee, Yoshiro Mori, was forced to step down after his comments that women talk too much in meetings sparked outrage.
Japan ranks 120th out of 156 countries on the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report. That's the lowest among G7 countries. It lags behind particularly when it comes to women's economic participation, and it ranks only 147th for political empowerment.
Women say they often lack role models. When Rika Usami began training in karate, she was the only girl in her entire school. But she kept training, and her winning performance at the 2012 Karate World Championships earned her the nickname the Queen of Kata. This year, she became the first ever female head of the Japan Karate-Do Federation Strengthening Committee, charged with coaching the Olympic team. But she says broader change is needed.
We need an environment that is easier for women to work after having children. My husband has to look after our 3-year-old when I'm away, and so his workplace needs to understand. A better work environment is needed, not just in the karate world, but the whole of Japan.
Muay Thai instructor Matsumoto is optimistic about the future of combat sports for women.
Now we've got to the stage where there are women-only tournaments and a lot of excitement. And YouTube has been an important tool for attracting new people to the sport. I think it's great that now there's a much more welcoming atmosphere.
With women representing almost half of the athletes at the Tokyo Olympics, some are hoping that the event will drive forward the gender equality discussion in Japan and help to inspire the next generation. Phoebe Amoroso, CGTN, Tokyo.
And by this time next week, the Tokyo Olympics will be underway. More than 11,000 athletes will be in the Japanese capital for a Games like no other, a spectator-free pandemic Olympics.
CGTN's Stephen Cole investigates what we can expect and asks Hugh Robertson, chair of the British Olympics Association, just how the athletes and the people of Japan remain safe.
Well, we put in place the most rigorous testing regime possible.
So it started actually way back a couple of months ago with the fact that we're pretty confident that all our athletes will be double vaccinated. So they have that precaution. They will then do tests 2 weeks out, 4 days out, 3 days out, and then a run of lateral flow tests. They will isolate as a team for 3 days on the way in. So we are absolutely doing everything we can to ensure not only that our athletes turn up at the start line in the best possible shape, but that they do so in a way that protects the host population. And we're very conscious of our responsibility to the people of Japan. We actually feel very close to the people of Japan in all of this because London was a host city back in 2012. We knew very early on that Tokyo was going to be the host city in 2020, now in 2021. So we feel, apart from the close relationships that exist already between our two countries, we feel that responsibility very, very closely, and we will do everything, absolutely everything within our power, as I say, not only to ensure our athletes are in the best possible shape, but also that they're presented in a way that keeps the population of Tokyo safe.
And you can see more of that interview on the agenda with Stephen Cole this weekend here on CGTN. Meanwhile, one of Tokyo's newer residents has been stopping traffic in the city's Shinjuku district. A giant hologram of a 3D cat has become the new selfie hotspot for residents. The creature has been projected onto a 1,600 square foot screen and has been delighting shoppers who think he is just perfect. Of course, more at europe.cgtn.com.
That was terrible. The UK and Australia are at risk of losing World Heritage status for two sites. Overdevelopment in the city of Liverpool and deterioration of the Great Barrier Reef could see them both struck off as UNESCO debates who's in and who's out. Hosted by China, online meetings are being held to determine which areas deserve to be recognised. Nearly 50 new sites could be added to more than 1,100 listed worldwide.
Spain has 48 UNESCO sites already listed, third only to China and Italy. It's hoping to increase the number. Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid.
For just over 200 years, Madrid's Museo del Prado has provided cultural enjoyment for locals and visitors from all over the world. It survived civil war, natural disasters, and of course, the pandemic. The museum, with its collection of more than 15,000 paintings, drawings, engravings and sculptures, forms part of the Paseo del Prado and El Retiro area of Madrid, which is competing to be named as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
But I think it will be an honor and a recognition. This museum is 200 years old and is very recognized around the globe. And the value of the painting and the masterpieces is well known everywhere. But I think this kind of title of recognition is a sort of a tick on the agenda. And at this moment of difficult situation around the globe, it will be another element to come to visit Madrid.
The pandemic and the resulting lockdown saw the Prado Museum report an 84% decline in ticket sales. Although the queues seen for its reopening last year, proof of the importance of cultural landmarks like the Prado in a post-pandemic world.
In this global crisis, we hope it will be over soon. The culture has increased its value. We have the top score never in internet, in our website, because people need culture. It's not war, it's reality. And we are very happy of that. And we hope that all this interest and curiosity transform in visit and real experience, which is the most important.
Now, the bid to become a World Heritage Site doesn't just include a Museo del Prado. It also includes this. This is Madrid's Royal Park, also known as El Retiro, and along with the Prado Museum, this area is a unique mix of culture, science and nature, all located in the very heart of the city. The original idea of the site was to bring all those elements together in a space that was easily accessible to the public. The passage of time has seen the urban sprawl of Madrid grow ever larger, and yet this site remained relatively untouched right at its centre. The organisers behind the bid say this factor perfectly fulfills the criteria needed to achieve World Heritage status. The final decision will be made at the 44th session of the World Heritage Committee at Fuzhou in China at the end of July. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
The headlines again. 120 people dead, hundreds more missing as flooding devastates Europe, with many wondering why severe weather warnings were missed.
It's now the world's largest carbon trading market as China intensifies efforts to cut emissions.
And the UK's daily COVID infections passed 50,000 just days before the economy fully reopens.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.